This is my basement. Well, a representation of it anyway. It is a couple of bedrooms, a bathroom, a living area, and my workshop. But this guest room back here is where we'll be focusing today. More specifically, the corner of the wall just as you walk in the door. See, I'd like to build a set of 3 corner shelves to take advantage of this space, which would otherwise go unused. With the needed space for the door to open, that area is too small for a regular set of bookshelves or a chair, so we figured a set of corner shelves would be a nice alternative where we could put a few things, like, a potted plant, or some books, or a Star Wars Imperial Walker, something real classy. So, that's what we're going to be doing today. Let's get cracking. I'll be using some reclaimed pine siding for this project. After denailing and ripping the boards down, they appeared to be in pretty good shape, except for the warping. So I called in my shop buddy to give me a hand. In order to make the panels, I needed to get some good glue line joints, so I ran every board that had an edge to be glued over the jointer. This will ensure I have a nice tight joint when gluing things up. All in all, I had to make 3 panels from the boards that I had. I used Titebond 3 to give me plenty of time to make adjustments before the glue started to set. And to address the warping, I used a series of culling boards to apply vertical clamping pressure while the pipe clamps squeezed everything together horizontally. I measured the maximum width that my little planer can handle, and it came to just over 12.5 inches. So once the glue dried, I took the clamps off all 3 panels, scraped off any residual glue squeeze out, and cut them all down to 12.5 inches wide on the table saw. Now it was time to get out my planer and plane all of the panels down to their final thickness. The goal was to keep the total thickness of the top, the bottom, and the spacer of each shelf to just under 2 inches so that I could use some 2-inch edge banding along the front face. So as each panel was passed through the planer, I checked the thickness with my calipers until I got each one exactly the right thickness that I wanted. Next, it was time to trim the snipe off the panels so that I didn't accidentally incorporate it into the shelves. The easiest way for me to do this was by using my crosscut sled on the table saw, along with the hold-down clamp from my miter saw. I simply drilled a hole in the fence of my crosscut sled and dropped the clamp in. This allows me to hold down long pieces like these panels so that I can safely make crosscuts. Using my unparalleled superhuman math skills, I used a ton of trial and error until I found the exact measurement I needed to make a right triangle that accommodated the entire width of the 12.5-inch panel. Then I grabbed my miter gauge, which I rarely use, and set that at 45 degrees. I made a series of nerve-wracking 45-degree cuts and a bunch of 90-degree trimming cuts to get all the triangles that I needed, which was 2 per panel, so 6 of them total. And I made sure to label each pair so that I didn't lose track. And with all of the shelf pieces cut out, I needed to true up each pair's edges so they'd be flush with one another. I did this by clamping them together, putting them in the vise, and using a hand plane to shave off any variations. I had to be very careful not to tear out the ends with the hand plane, especially when I was working on the sides, because it's all end grain, and it's a very different feeling when planing end grain versus face grain. With the tops and bottoms all trued up, it was time to cut out a bunch of strips to use for spacers. These spacers will be used between the top and bottom at the front along the face of each shelf. See, the idea is that essentially we'll be creating a pocket that will wrap around and get screwed to a cleat that is already mounted on the wall. And the spacer also helps create a flat surface in front where I can later put edge banding. Now, since I used offcuts, my strips weren't long enough, so I use a couple of squares, line up, and mark the pieces that I'll need to fill out the rest of each one of the spacers. Then I take each of these 3 pieces over to the miter saw and trim them down to size. So with a little bit of glue, I could then line up and stick each one of these 3 pieces down, which finished out the spacers for all 3 of the shelves. Then I sanded all of the exposed faces of all the tops and the bottom, starting at 80 and going up to about 220. The next step was to then marry the tops and bottoms together. I did this by spreading on some glue to the bottom, putting in a temporary spacer, making sure everything is square, and then popping in several 18-gauge nails just to hold things in place while I got some clamps down there. I clamped up each one with a few clamps and tried to clean up as much of the glue squeeze out that I could, knowing that if I don't do it now, it's just going to be way more difficult later. Here, I'm measuring out the length that the cleats need to be that will get mounted on the wall. Once I have them all marked, I gather them up, head over to the miter saw, and I cut them all out at once, because I'm a ninja like that. Now I'm counterboring most of the way through each of the cleats so that the mounting screw can be recessed and will have enough length to reach the wall anchors. Now once the counterbores are done, I switch the bits and drill the rest of the way through. I made sure to mark on the shelves where the cleat screws will be so that I don't accidentally hit them when I screw the shelves to the cleats. Next up was edge banding. I just clamped each shelf into the vise and used my 7th grade home economics skills to run a hot iron down the edge. This melts the glue on the other side, which veneers the face. Cut off the excess with a utility knife and use an edge trimming tool to trim the edges, because that's what edge trimmers do. Yeah. Now, since the walls weren't perfectly square in the bedroom, there was a little bit of wobble when I held the shelves up. So I measured the gap and then shaved off the appropriate amount with a hand plane to make each one fit very snugly with no play at all. Just like that. Perfect fit. Next, it was time to mount the cleats on the wall. I did this by holding each cleat up, leveling it, and making 2 small hole marks by drilling through the mounting holes. Then I just swapped to a larger bit, widened out each of the 2 holes, and then hammered in the anchors. Anchor 1 and anchor 2. Then, with both anchors in place, I just had to screw the cleat to the wall. Now, let me play you the song of my people. It goes like this. I cleaned up all the whiskers on each of the shelves with a small block plane, and then it was time for finishing. I decided to go with a dark ebony penetrating stain so that the shelves would match the dresser and the headboard that's also in that room. I only put on 1 coat of stain and managed to get the shelves to their final color. These pine boards were super thirsty and it really took the stain very, very well. Once the stain was dry, I started spraying on some water-based polyurethane to seal in the color, add some protection, and give it that subtle gloss finish that I really like. And then between the coats, I sanded with 220 to knock down any imperfections, and then used an air hose to blast off any of the dust before going right back at it with more coats. Here I'm marking where each of the mounting holes need to go, drilling them out at a slight angle, and then countersinking each one of them too. Now it's time to mount them on the wall. I slide the first one on the cleats and push it all the way back and nestle it into the corner. And then drill some pilot holes into the cleats, and then just use some drywall screws to finish things out. Now, here's another song of my people. It goes like this. And we're done. Now, here's a slow Hollywood cinematic upwards pan shot to show you the finished product in all of its majesty. Pretty cool, huh? Well, there you have it, folks. A set of 3-corner shelves. I think they turned out really nice. I think the best thing about them is that we're taking advantage of some space which would have otherwise been unused and wasted. Pretty simple, straightforward project. I'm sure just by watching me, you guys could figure out how to do it yourself. But for those of you that want it, I'm including a download for the SketchUp plans and the draw-ups of these shelves. So check that out if you want it. If this is your first time here, be sure to click that subscribe button, like the video, and leave me a comment. We'll see you next time. Take care. Bye. This upside down, don't I? Nice. You almost mounted it upside down, you moron. Why isn't it cutting? Oh. You put the blades in upside down, you idiot. I got it. And it only took 6 takes. Are you serious? Who's calling me? And they just hang up. How rude. I made a triangle. And once the counterbores are done, I switch the bits and I drill the west of the way. I drill the west the way through. No, I think we should walk in. All right, let's try that.